The slap of elastic snapped like a gunshot through the silent classroom. Ms. Sloan flinched. She didn't scream, didn't cry out. Only her hand shot back instinctively to cover the pain that bloomed across her back. Laughter erupted behind her. Boys, maybe 4 of them, sitting in the last row. She didn't need to turn around. She already knew who did it. Ms. Sloan was 27, barely 5'5", and the newest English teacher at Halewood High. Her face looked kind, her glasses professional. Her clothing, modest blouses and skirts, suggested someone gentle. But the students, especially the troublemakers, didn't see a teacher. They saw a target. Behind her, Marcus Green chuckled too loudly. "Sorry, miss," he said. "Didn't know the strap would echo." That earned him another round of snickers. Even some girls giggled. The room shifted with teenage cruelty. Ms. Sloan turned slowly, eyes calm, her voice lower than usual. "Sit up straight." Marcus grinned, teeth gleaming like a hyena's. "Just trying to loosen you up. You're always so tense." Another laugh. Her cheeks burned, but not from embarrassment. It was the same burning she remembered from 12 years ago. Another classroom, another group of bullies, another moment of humiliation. But that girl didn't know how to fight back. This woman did. Mrs. Sloan didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply resumed the lesson. We were analyzing the structure of Shakespeare's sonnets. Marcus, line 5. He blinked. "What?" "Line 5. Read it. Now." Something in her tone sliced through his smugness. He obeyed. But inside, her thoughts were spinning, heart-racing muscles coiled tight beneath her button-up blouse. She had spent a decade burying the martial reflexes of her youth, promising herself never to let anger control her. But this wasn't anger. It was strategy. And something had changed. Later that day, in this break room, she sat staring into her tea. Her back still ached from the snap. The sound haunted her. It wasn't just the physical sting, it was the message. That her body wasn't her own in their eyes. That her authority could be stripped away with a childish flick of fingers. Another teacher walked in, oblivious, chatting about the upcoming staff meeting. Ms. Sloan nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about the discipline forms she could file, about the cold conversations with parents who'd say he was just joking. She pictured Marcus smirking through his fake apology, learning nothing. No, this wasn't about punishment. This was about setting the tone. She stood, finished her tea, and looked out the window at the school's courtyard, students moving in noisy herds. Her gaze locked on Marcus, tossing a basketball, laughing like nothing mattered. Her jaw tightened. It was time to remind them who they were dealing with. News of the bra strap incident spread faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, students were whispering in every hallway. "Did you hear what Marcus did to Ms. Sloan?" She didn't even react. Bet she was too scared to say anything. The gossip swirled like vultures over a battlefield, none of them knowing how wrong they were. Ms. Sloan heard it all passing by lockers in the girls' restroom, even from the smirks of students in her other classes. No one came to her defense. Not even the teachers. Just another incident. Another awkward silence. But beneath her quiet expression, something stirred. That night, at home in her small apartment, she slid open a hidden drawer. Beneath old textbooks and grading folders, she pulled out a worn black belt, and a faded certificate showed in rank awarded to her at age 16. Her fingers trembled slightly as they touched the fabric. It had been years since she trained seriously. After leaving her hometown, she'd sworn off karate. It reminded her too much of the pain why she started, not just how she finished. She was 13 when the bullying started. A gang of older girls made her life miserable, tripping her in hallways, mocking her clothes, cornering her in locker rooms. One day, they'd pinned her to a wall and yanked her bra strap so hard it bruised her for a week. That night, she begged her mother to let her quit school. Instead, her mother had driven her to a dusty dojo in a quiet strip mall. The dojo master, a stern woman named Sensei Kamiko, never smiled during warm-ups and never accepted tears as excuses. Discipline is not for punishing others, Kamiko once told her. It is for protecting yourself with honor. And that was how Sarah Sloan rebuilt herself from the ground up, one kata at a time. Now, she stood in her living room, breathing slow, centered. She moved through old forms, slowly at first, then, with increasing fluidity. Her kicks were still sharp, her blocks precise. The years fell away. She wasn't a victim. Not anymore. The next morning, she walked into school, not with revenge in her heart, but with purpose. She had already requested access to substitute for the self-defense elective next week. The regular coach had called in sick. Ms. Sloan had offered without hesitation. The timing was perfect. In class, Marcus and his gang were quieter than usual, but still cocky. She didn't confront them. She didn't need to. She knew they'd try again. The power was in the anticipation. After school, she sat alone in the empty gym planning. The mats were dusty from disuse. The lockers creaked open with rust. But the space was sacred. She laid out cones, repositioned equipment, adjusted mirrors. Then she paused, standing in the center, and looked at her reflection. "You waited too long last time," she whispered. "Not again." And as the echoes of her whisper faded into the gym walls, Ms. Sloan smiled, not out of malice, but clarity. She was not going to report Marcus. She was going to teach him. And when he failed that test, the lesson would be unforgettable. The self-defense class was scheduled for Friday afternoon, last period, right before the weekend. Perfect. By Wednesday, Marcus had grown bolder. The lack of punishment from the administration had inflated his ego. No phone call to his parents, no trip to the principal's office. To him, it was a green light. "She didn't even tell on me," he bragged to his friends in the lunchroom. Bet she liked it. His words turned heads. Even some students who'd laughed earlier now looked uncomfortable. But Marcus didn't care. Power was a drug, and right now, he thought he was untouchable. That afternoon, Ms. Sloan taught her literature class like normal, except for one thing. At the end of class, she handed Marcus a yellow slip. "What's this?" he asked, suddenly cautious. "Reminder," she said with a calm smile. "You're scheduled for the elective self-defense session this Friday." "Wait, I didn't sign up. I volunteered you." The class needed a few strong boys for demonstration drills, and I thought you might benefit from a bit of physical awareness. Laughter rippled through the class, but not at her expense. Marcus flushed. He wanted to argue, but found no ground. She had already turned away, erasing the board. He crumpled the slip, but kept it. Thursday dragged slowly for Marcus. Something about the way Miss Sloan looked at him, measured unreadable, began to unsettle him. She wasn't angry. That was the problem. It was easier when people shouted or cried. This quiet control. It twisted his stomach. Friday came. The gym buzzed, with the energy of 20 restless teens, excited for a hands-on class. Mats were laid out. Mirrors lined the walls. Ms. Sloan wore a sleek black athletic uniform, simple but commanding. Her hair was tied back tightly, her demeanor calm. Today, she announced, we're going to learn boundary awareness and defensive reaction. We'll begin with some basic movements. Stances. Breath control. Marcus rolled his eyes. Marcus, she called. Front and center. He hesitated. The room shifted. All eyes locked on him. He stood pretending to yawn and swaggered to the mat. She waited unmoved. Face me. He obeyed. We'll demonstrate a common defense against inappropriate contact. Sometimes someone will grab at you from behind. What's your instinct? He grinned. Depends who's grabbing. Snickers. She didn't blink. Let's pretend it's unwelcome. Ready. Before he could answer, she spun behind him. In one swift, seamless movement, her hand reached toward his shoulder, just enough to mimic a tug, and he instinctively leaned forward. That's when it happened. She stepped to his side, pivoted, and delivered a low, controlled sweep that knocked his balance clean out from under him. With a soft thud, Marcus hit the mat flat on his back when knocked clean out. The gym went dead silent. He gasped, stunned. What the? Ms. Sloan leaned over, voice like ice. That was a level 1 takedown. I barely touched you. The students stared wide-eyed. Phones slid silently out of pockets. No one laughed now. Marcus scrambled up, humiliated. His face was red, his confidence shattered. He looked at her with something he'd never felt for a teacher before, fear wrapped in awe. She turned back to the class. Anyone else want to try? Not a single hand went up. The video hit social media before the final bell rang. A 7-second clip. Ms. Sloan, calm and composed, sweeping Marcus off his feet and leaving him breathless on the gym mat. No sound was needed, just the thud, the silence, and the collective gasp. By the time students filed out into the courtyard, it had already reached over 2,000 views on the school's unofficial gossip page. Whispers turned to reverent murmurs. Did you see what she did to Marcus? She's like a ninja or something. No way I'm messing with her again. Meanwhile, Ms. Sloan walked back to her classroom, every step controlled, every breath steady. She hadn't smiled during the takedown. She didn't gloat now. She knew the difference between justice and humiliation. What she'd done wasn't revenge. It was instruction administered in the language Marcus best understood. Back in her room, she placed a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird on her desk and sat down. Ironically, today's lesson had more in common with Atticus Finch than Shakespeare. You don't teach integrity by preaching. You live it. The door creaked open. It was Principal Merrick holding his tablet awkwardly. His expression was unreadable. Ms. Sloan, he said slowly. Can we talk? She gestured to the chair across from her. Of course. He placed the tablet between them, and hit play. The video looped. When it ended, he looked up. Did you plan that? I planned a self-defense lesson, she replied, unshaken, with a known student who had already violated personal boundaries. I thought a practical demonstration might be effective. He cleared his throat. You do realize this is controversial. Is it more controversial than a student sexually harassing a teacher in front of the class? He looked away. That was the crack in his armor. I didn't file a report because I believed in handling it as an educator, she continued, not a victim. The video speaks for itself. He wasn't injured, just humbled. Principal Merrick sighed, then tapped the screen again. The clip replayed. I've had 5 emails from parents, he said. 4 of them are thanking you. She raised an eyebrow. And the fifth, Marcus's father wants a meeting. He hesitated. But even he admitted his son might have deserved it. A silence settled between them. Technically, Merrick said finally, "You did nothing wrong. And honestly, I wish more teachers had your control." She nodded once. "I didn't do it to make a statement. I did it because silence doesn't protect people." He stood slowly. "You're going to be a legend, you know. I don't want to be a legend. I want them to learn." As he left, Ms. Sloan turned back to her window. Outside, Marcus was walking alone. No friends laughing beside him this time. Shoulders slumped, eyes down. She didn't hate him. In fact, she pitied him. No one had ever set a boundary with him before. Maybe this was the first time someone did him a favor. Her door opened again. A girl stepped in quietly. "Anna, one of her shyer students." "Ms. Sloan," she whispered. "Yes, I wanted to say thank you for what you did." Ms. Sloan smiled gently. "You're welcome, Anna." She didn't need applause, just that. Monday arrived, but Halewood High didn't feel the same. Students who used to smirk at Ms. Sloan now watched her with newfound respect and maybe a little fear. The halls no longer echoed with jeers. The desks stayed straighter. Even Marcus bruised ego, and all took his seat without a word, eyes forward like a soldier awaiting orders. But Ms. Sloan hadn't come for vengeance. She came to teach, and now that she had their attention, she intended to make it count. During first period, she started with a quote on the board. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." She turned and faced the class. "Who here was afraid last Friday?" she asked calmly. Hands didn't raise, but gazes shifted. The air was heavy. "I was," she said. "I was afraid to act. Afraid that if I stood up for myself, I'd be labeled the problem. Afraid to lose my job. Afraid to be misunderstood." She paused, letting that truth settle. "But I did it anyway. Because silence is not strength. And boundaries matter." She didn't name Marcus. She didn't need to. Then she walked to her desk and handed out copies of the next unit, The Art of War, by Sun Tzu. "Today, we study the power of discipline, not to harm others, but to protect dignity." Marcus didn't look up, but his fingers clutched the booklet tighter than necessary. Something was shifting in him. Whether it was guilt, shame, or the start of self-awareness, Ms. Sloan couldn't say. But she'd planted a seed. At lunch, she sat alone in the staff lounge until Coach Brenner, the school's PE teacher, dropped into the seat beside her. "You really showed us something Friday," he said, grinning. "I showed a takedown. That's all. Don't play modest. You did what most of us are too afraid to do. I didn't want a spectacle. Well, you got a movement. Half the senior girls signed up for your next self-defense session. You may have started something bigger than you know." She glanced out the window again. Students were chatting quietly in groups pointing at her classroom. But the expressions weren't mocking, they were curious, open. The principal emailed her that afternoon. "The board is supportive of your approach. They're asking if you'd consider designing a school-wide seminar on boundary awareness and physical confidence." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she stayed after school, stacking mats again, realigning cones, preparing. And just before the sun dipped behind the bleachers, Marcus appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak for a while. "Then I told my dad what I did." She turned silent. "He made me watch the video 15 times, Marcus muttered. "Said it's the only lesson I've ever actually learned in school." Miss Sloan folded her arms. "And what did you learn?" Marcus looked up, shame raw on his face. "That I crossed a line. That I wasn't funny. I was just a coward." He swallowed. "Can I come back to the self-defense class? I don't want to be that guy again." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded. Be here early tomorrow. You'll help me set up. He blinked. Really? If you want to rebuild something, Marcus, you start with the floor. This story reminds us that dignity is not defended through silence and respect is not granted. It's earned through action, clarity, and strength. Ms. Sloan could have chosen the easy path, filing a report, seeking punishment, or retreating into shame. Instead, she turned a humiliating moment into a teaching opportunity, not just for her students, but for herself. Bullies often thrive where boundaries are weak and consequences are delayed. But when courage rises to meet cruelty, something powerful happens: change. Real, lasting change. Strength isn't just about throwing a kick. It's about knowing when and why to stand your ground. The world needs more teachers like Miss Sloan, and more people who understand that defending one's worth doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you whole.